Chapter 10 The Lieutenant's Office. An anonymous letter was waiting in Lieutenant Bill Slack's mail slot when he came to work shortly before 7 a.m. one July 1987 day. As the operations lieutenant working the day shift, Slack was the equivalent of a desk sergeant in a police precinct. He poured himself some coffee and took his position behind the glass-topped desk, the biggest piece of furniture in the cramped lieutenant's office. Besides the desk, the room contained a bench, a typewriter, and a row of metal file cabinets. Slack lighted the first cigarette of what would be 2 packs that day and began reading the letter. Although he was only in his early 40s, Slack seemed older. He was nearly bald, had a smoker's hacking cough, and was no longer the trim, wasted Marine he had been when he first joined the Bureau direct from a combat tour in Vietnam. But it was his manner that set Slack apart. He was fatherly, always calm, slow to criticize. Many considered him to be the best desk lieutenant in the hothouse. The anonymous letter contained one line: "Look, Undur mattress, B215. The writer was either the world's worst speller or intentionally trying to appear dumb. Slack telephoned Steve Lacey, head of the prison's shakedown crew, and told him to search cell 215 in B cell house. Slack didn't mention anything about looking under the mattress. He figured he shouldn't have to. 20 minutes later, Lacey strutted into the lieutenant's office with a sissy shank, a knife made with a melted toothbrush around a razor blade. It wasn't much good for stabbing, but it could be used to slice someone's face. "Want me to bring in the shithead whose cell we found this in?" asked Lacey, who nearly called inmates shitheads. Slack nodded, and a few minutes later, a white convict was led into the office by Lacey and 2 other guards. Slack lifted up the sissy shank to the convict so he could see it and then dropped its safety into a desk drawer. "Ever see that before?" asked Slack. The inmate shook his head and frowned. "It was found under the mattress in your cell," Slack continued. "Those fucking ninjas." "Watch your mouth," snapped Slack, who didn't tolerate racial slurs. The convict caught his breath. The arteries pulsing in his neck looked like hot blue electric wires sheathed under skin drawn as taut as a drumhead. "It's a fucking frame, Lieutenant. Can't you see it?" he said. Slack leaned back in his metal desk chair, which creaked like a rusty schoolyard teeter-totter. "So what's your version?" The inmate glanced around. 2 guards stood beside him. Lacey was directly behind. "Lieutenant, can we do this in private?" Some inmates will fight when brought to the lieutenant's office. It's a matter of pride to pop a guard before being dragged to the hole. But Slack didn't think the convict was looking to better the odds by getting him alone. For one thing, he didn't need to. It was going to be a struggle for 3 guards and Slack to handle him if he fought. "Okay, come on," Slack replied, walking through a door at the back of the office. It led into a room normally used by the prison's captain, but the hothouse was temporarily without one, so Slack slipped behind the desk and motioned the inmate to begin talking. "These ninjas stole my watch, okay?" he explained. "I didn't know who first took it, but I let it be known I wanted it back. I had some friends put word out too." "What friends?" Slack asked innocently. "Don't bullshit me, Lieutenant. You know what I'm talking about." Indeed, Slack knew. The convict ran numbers for a group of car thieves, pimps, extortionists, and bank robbers from the deep south known as the Georgia Boys. It was the Georgia Boys who put word out that the watch had better be returned or someone was going to get stabbed. "The ninjas who took my watch got a guy to bring it to me to apologize, you know. This guy says to me, 'Hey, no hard feelings, huh?' to see if I'm going to retaliate, and I tell him, 'No, everything is cool as long as I got my watch back.'" Slack smirked. "Hey, I'm serious. I'm a peaceful guy. I got my watch back, so what the fuck, who cares? But these ninjas must have figured I was going to get even, so they planted that shank in my cell and then tipped you off. Someone dropped a kite on me, didn't they?" Slack didn't reply. He asked questions. He didn't answer them. "Who were the guys who stole your watch?" Slack asked. "Some ninjas." "Do these individuals have names?" "Suspect so," the convict said. "So what are they?" asked Slack. The convict shrugged. "Come on, Lieutenant. I'm no rat." Slack asked a few more questions, but didn't learn anything. He motioned the convict back into the outer office where Lacey and the others were waiting. "As crazy as it sounds," Slack said, I happen to believe you, but I still gotta lock you up. If I let you go, how do I know you aren't going to leave this office and go stick one of these guys for trying to frame you? The inmate smiled. Now, let's say a man of your fine character decides that he's above all that, Slack continued. Let's say I let you go and you don't seek revenge. What do you think the guys who tried to frame you are going to do? They're going to figure you are pissed, so they're going to try to stick you before you stick them. Either way, someone's going to get hurt, so I gotta lock you up. Hey, don't do me no favors, the inmate snapped. Lacey put handcuffs on the inmate and let him out. My gut feeling is he's telling the truth, Slack said, but he could be lying. He might have written that letter to me himself. He might have put that shank under his own mattress because he wanted to go to the hole. Sometimes inmates get into debt or into an argument with another convict. They know that they are going to either end up stabbing someone or getting stabbed, so they set up their own arrest. That way they can be taken to the hole where they will be safe without losing face with their peers. Whether or not the convict was framed or had planned his own arrest ultimately didn't matter, Slack said. Unless the inmate told the guards who had stolen his watch, he was going to be found guilty of having a weapon in his cell, a serious offense that would result in his spending an additional 6 months in prison and being transferred to Marion. But the inmate was caught in a catch-22. He really can't say who framed him, Slack explained, because if he tells, he'd be snitching and he's going to risk being labeled a rat. The truth is that we really don't know what is happening here, Slack admitted, and there is no way to find out. The bottom line is that we come in here every day, do our jobs, and go home. These inmates are here 24 hours a day, and this is their home and their world. We only think that we know what is happening, and most of the time we probably don't have any clue to what really is going on. The remainder of the shift was uneventful, and at 4 o'clock, Slack turned over the operations desk to Lieutenant Edward Price. Slack still had an hour's worth of paperwork to complete before he went home, but Pierce was in charge. At age 35, with a handlebar mustache and salt and pepper hair, Pierce had the sort of ruggedly handsome face seen in cigarette advertisements. Self-confident, some would say cocky. He ran his shift like a rooster overseeing the henhouse. Some guards never catch on to prison life. They lack the intuition that the best lieutenants have. Pierce had seemed to understand prisons from the first time he stepped into one. Yet, despite his abilities, he was not well liked by supervisors. They said he lacked polish. Pierce thought there was a different reason, because, in his words, I don't kiss ass. His buddy Lieutenant Sandals had tried to school him in diplomacy, but it wasn't in his nature. If a man is wrong, you gotta call him no matter what he is, Pierce said. This sounded more gallant than it often was. Pierce loved working the shift from 4 to midnight. All you have to do is your job. Not all that Mickey Mouse political bullshit that goes on when the brass are here. At night, Pierce was literally in charge of the entire penitentiary, and as soon as the mess hall was finished serving at 6 o'clock, the phones in the lieutenant's office began ringing. Hey boss, I got 2 inmates here who want to swap mattresses, a guard in C cell house told him. Can they do that? As long as one ain't pressing the other out of his, it's okay with me, said Pierce, reminding the guard to make certain that both inmates really wished to swap. Seconds later, another guard called. He had caught 2 inmates shooting craps in the cell, but when he tried to arrest them, they had eaten the evidence. What evidence? Pierce asked. The inmates had made dice out of sugar cubes, the guard explained, which they swallowed when the guard caught them. Pierce roared and told the guard to assign them to some extra chores around the cell house rather than take them to the hole. An alarm sounded. Fight on B cell house stairs. Pierce bolted from his desk. Guards usually carry a 2-way radio or a body alarm that emits a high-pitched squeal when punched. Whenever an alarm sounded, all guards were supposed to run to the source, unless they were assigned to a job that couldn't be abandoned, even in an emergency. Pierce ran down the center hallway into the rotunda and up the B cell house stairs, but both convicts had vanished by the time he got there. The guard who had sounded the alarm had gotten a glimpse of one of them, but wasn't certain who it was. Naturally, none of the inmates loitering in the stairwell had seen anything. When Pierce got back to the lieutenant's office, a guard was waiting with the drunk convict. The inmate had been drinking a concoction made from bread, oranges, water, and sugar, left in a plastic bag for 4 days to ferment. Pierce gave him a breath test and sent him to the hole. The phone rang. An inmate in C cell house had just ripped his sink off the wall and the entire tier was flooding. Well, turn off the water, Pierce ordered. Damn rookies, he said, hanging up the receiver. They called me instead of turning off a valve. As Pierce poured himself a cup of coffee, he overheard two convicts yelling outside in the hall in front of the commissary. He got my ice cream, one complained when Pierce appeared. That's a fucking lie, Lieutenant. I don't know you nothing, man, the other replied, grasping a half-eaten ice cream cone in his hand. Lieutenant, I'm telling you, if he takes another lick of that ice cream, I'm gonna break his face, the first inmate threatened. The other inmate defiantly began to lift the cone to his mouth. Just hold it right there, Pierce ordered. The inmate lowered the cone. A few minutes later, Pierce had resolved the argument and both convicts walked away. Fights, flooded cells, drunk inmates, the ice cream spat. No one would care the next morning that Pierce had handled each of these problems. They were trivial events, remembered only because he would have to file paperwork about them. Yet, even the most insignificant confrontation could swiftly escalate to violence at the hot house. Convicts had killed over a pack of cigarettes. Some college-educated pencil pusher making 5 times my salary and some big corporation fucks up, and the only thing that happens is that the company loses some money, Pierce said. I fuck up and there are bodies on the floor. The threat of violence underlies every action and reaction in prison. Pierce liked to compare prison work to riding a motorcycle. Most rides were routine, but sometimes on a late sweltering summer night, a rider would find himself on one of those endless flat Kansas 2 lanes with only the lights of a distant farmhouse pricking through the prairie blackness. Leaning forward, you could screw the throttle, ignore the red and green RPM gauge, let your instincts tell you when to shift gears. At 75 miles per hour, the wind stings the naked face. At 95 miles per hour, eyes squint, teeth clench. A rider must now squeeze his thighs against the gas tank, keep the front tire on the white center stripe. At 105, there is no time to think, no time to pause, only to react. And at 110 miles per hour, there is not even time to do that. At that speed, on a motorcycle, a rider simply shoots blindly ahead into the blackness. And then it happens, that strange feeling when pure elation and sheer terror join. Some call it pushing yourself to the edge, riding the lip of the envelope. Being a lieutenant at the hot house was like that, Pierce said. Routine, even boring, and then suddenly you were flying at 110 miles per hour into the blackness, never knowing for certain just where this ride would go or how it would end. Pierce loved it. Unlike Slack, he dreaded sitting behind a desk and he looked for any excuse to leave the lieutenant's office. He could be reached by radio during emergencies. Tonight, he walked to the hole where a veteran convict was about to be escorted to the prison hospital. Some 5 years earlier, the inmate had gotten drunk, smeared his body with butter, broken a mop handle into 2 pieces, and screamed at guards until they finally rushed him. Pierce had been the first through the cell door that night and had been hit in the head with one of the sticks. They had not spoken since that fight. Old Thunderbird, Pierce said, calling the inmate by his name, was just letting off steam. It wasn't personal on either of our parts. Pierce fell in with the 3 guards, taking Thunderbird to the dentist where he would be fitted with false teeth. At least once a week, the dentist stayed late into the evening to handle patients who were busy working in the prison factories during the day, or who for some other reason couldn't come into the hospital during regular hours. What's mama gonna say when you get home and pull those choppers out? Pierce chided him. Shit, Lieutenant, her pussy ain't gonna taste no different. Pierce left him at the hospital entrance and strolled into the prison yard, where he took a seat on the concrete bleachers. An after-dinner softball game was underway. He sat by himself midway between a group of black inmates perched along the top row and a cluster of Italians sitting on the bottom row. The black inmates were from Washington, D.C. and were known simply as D.C. Blacks. They were one of the most difficult groups at Leavenworth for guards to control. Because it has limited jail space of its own, the nation's capital sends a disproportionate number of inmates into the federal system, and most are black, a reflection of the city's predominantly black population. At the hot house, DC blacks were the largest single ethnic group from any single city, making up 10% of the overall population, and nearly all were well schooled in violence. DC blacks were especially notoriously known as locker knockers, petty thieves who ransacked the personal lockers of other inmates and for pressuring new inmates for sex. The dozen Italians sitting below Pierce were mafia wise guys. Each wore prison-issued white shorts and cotton shirts, but their clothing had been pressed and was brand new. Some smoked William Penn cigars at 50 cents apiece, the highest priced stogies in the commissary. Gold chains dangled from their necks, and a stack of graphite tennis rackets, the most expensive item a convict could specially order at the hideout store, was nearby. Even though they were watching the ball game, each of the wise guys was sitting so he could face and hear an older convict in the group. Anthony Tony Ducks Corallo didn't say much, but when he spoke, his comments either brought a solemn nod or a boisterous laugh, depending upon which was appropriate. Corallo was the boss of the New York-based Lucchese crime family, a real-life mafia godfather, and no one at the hot house bothered him. Not that anyone had reason to. He was a perfect gentleman. In prison, a mafioso did his time as quietly as possible because it improved his chances for parole. There was only one time anyone could remember that a mafia member got into trouble, and that had happened at the penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where mafia members are frequently housed because of its proximity to New York City. A guard for some reason began harassing the wise guy. Every day, the guard searched the inmate's cell, went through his mail, and frisked him as he walked the compound until the wise guy had simply had enough. One day, a visitor from outside the prison came to see the wise guy. The guard saw the visitor slip something into the wise guy's hand. "What you got there?" the guard demanded. Without protest, the wise guy opened his fingers, revealing a photograph of the guard's 6-year-old daughter playing at her elementary school. "See how easy it can be?" the mafioso asked. Whether or not his story was true was impossible to tell, but every guard and most inmates in the hot house had heard about it. The message was clear. The mafia could reach out into the streets, and that made guards and other convicts nervous. Most of the black inmates sitting in the bleachers were dressed in jams, long shorts made from gray and blue sweatpants chopped off at the knee. Each wore high-top Nike tennis shoes with the laces intentionally untied. A few had wool stocking caps on their heads despite the July heat. None wore a shirt. They were in their early 20s, loud, full of horseplay. They provided a running commentary on the game. A batter slammed a pitch towards center field, a high, beautiful hit that forced the outfielder to race backward toward the prison wall. Just when it looked as if the hit was out of reach, the outfielder leaped back and snagged the ball in his bare hand since he didn't have time to raise his glove. The black inmates cheered. Pierce did too. Even the wise guys, who Pierce figured were wagering on the game in Italian, jumped up and applauded. Minutes later, another batter slammed the ball out to center field. There was a different outfielder playing now, and he badly misjudged the ball, allowing it to fall several feet behind him. "Stupid motherfucker," the DC black screamed. "Your mama sucks," another yelled, and at the end of his comment, drowned by a chorus of boos and similar obscenities. Even the player's own teammates pelted him with vulgarities. Except for a single guard standing across the yard, Pierce was the only officer out there among 400 inmates, many of them convicted killers. He leaned back in the evening sun, rested his black cowboy boots on the seat in front of him, and relaxed. "Some officers come in there and try to act like trained killers," he said. "Hey, they ain't fooling nobody but themselves. These inmates are for real. They can smell fear, and they know who is for real and who is selling wolf tickets. Now other officers will come in here and be real meek and mild, but if there's a shitstorm, they're right there, ready to do whatever's necessary. The secret is that there is no secret. You can't fake it in there. You're either the kind of person who can handle violence or you're not. People make this job harder than it is. If an inmate has something coming, his mail, a blanket, whatever, you give it to him. If you don't, you tell him. And most importantly, if an inmate ain't going over the fence or thumping somebody, then you just leave him be. Leave him the fuck alone." Had you asked Pierce's classmates at Wiley High School in Terre Haute, Indiana, if they ever thought he would end up in prison, most would have quickly answered yes. But as an inmate, not as a lieutenant. Pierce was, as he put it, a hood, a problem child. Enough so that at age 18 he was taken before a judge. who gave him a choice, jail or the military service. He chose the Navy. I decided to change my life. I decided no one else gave a fuck, really, but I decided and I changed it. Pierce said he was physically abused as a child. I had the living shit beat out of me with belts, 2x4s, fists, and that was my own mother, he said. Once I was beaten unconscious, that's why I'm not afraid of getting my ass whipped in there. There is nothing that these guys can bring to me that I've not already been through, and that is why it really pisses me off when some television program whips up a bunch of sympathy for these inmates by telling how they were abused children. That's bullshit. Their mama didn't drive them to the bank and force them to rob it. Since he joined the Bureau, Pierce's nose has been fractured twice, his upper lip sewed up more than a dozen times, and a piece of his ear chewed off during a scuffle. He paused and looked at the inmates exercising in the yard. What kind of convict would he have been if he had not been able to turn his life around? I asked. The idea intrigued him, but only for a moment. He tried to picture himself on the ball field, staring back at the bleachers and the faceless lieutenant seated there. How would he have felt if they were on the other side? It didn't compute. I'm not one of them, he said. Pierce looked at the prison industries building. In the summer, the yard stayed open until the shadow from the west prison wall reached the second windows of the printing plant. When the moment arrived, a horn would sound and inmates would trudge back into the main penitentiary. The night before, the horn had sounded during the final inning of an electrifying ball game. The losing team was at bat, was only one run behind, had 2 men on base, and its best hitter stepping to the plate. There were 2 outs. Before the pitcher could throw his pitch, the horn sounded, and the team that was ahead scrambled off the field, declaring victory. 9 convicts had cornered Pierce. A few accused him of deliberately setting off the signal to throw the game. Pierce was sitting in the bleachers tonight to make certain that the horn sounded between innings. It didn't really matter because tonight's game was lopsided. Still, he wanted several minutes after the shadow reached the windows before giving his okay for the horn. He wanted the inmates to realize he had listened to them. The yard cleared peacefully, and by 10 o'clock, all inmates were locked in their cells and being counted. Midnight approached. Time for Pierce to go home. Lieutenant Bill Thomas, a lanky, white-haired, quiet man, arrived at the lieutenant's office on schedule and chatted with him. A few minutes later, Pierce stepped outside the prison and walked over to his black motorcycle. He revved the engine as the guard in the front tower looked down and waved, and then he rode down the Horseshoe Drive.